So, Teresa coerced me into doing this weapons workshop so that I can kind of help her partake or help part my knowledge because I've been doing this for a number of years and I don't know, kind of good at it. So what I wanted to go through is just a couple of weapons forms: the heads, the rings with a ring lance, and the quintain for the ground targets. So things to consider when you are, in one case, riding with a sword, is find something that fits balanced in your hand, okay? And for me, a balanced sword is a long sword. Other people like heavier short swords, but what you have to consider is what is comfortable for you for swinging. And when you're going to swing your sword, the way that we do it in the SCA, which is not historically accurate, is we always swing away from our horse's head, okay? Because we don't want to hit them on the head. In period, they would be lining up with a forward shot, right? And then a backward shot, and sometimes from the backside forward. This is where you're getting more force, right? When you're mowing somebody down on the ground. But in the SCA, we want to swing backwards away from our horse's head so that we're not clocking them in the face, because they don't really like that so much. Good practicing of technique is not this, right? This is too closed body. You don't need to protect yourself up on the horse. Nobody's gonna hit you, right? So always make sure to give yourself a large swing, all right? So when you're practicing, go ahead and practice. You should almost always be doing these obstacles in a half seat or a forward seat or a 2-point. You should never be trying to do this stuff seated, unless you're on a walking horse that has a very smooth gait or a horse that has a really smooth polt, okay? So if you've got a walking horse who is like a couch, sit. But if you've got anybody else that's got a big stride or a big, get up, you're gonna wanna be up off of the saddle. So when you're practicing, practice being in that sort of half seat or forward seat, and really practice opening up your arm. Now, as we all know from being equestrians, you don't wanna be doing this with your hips, right? None of this happens, because you know what happens with your horse? They go that way, right? And I see that very often where people are not dissecting their body, right? Their upper body from their lower body, and you end up twisting your hips, and they're like, why is my horse going off course? And I'm like, well, because you're telling them. If you're weaving, you want to then start to incorporate some of the hip movement to help your horse bend the poles, okay? This doesn't need to be some big serpentine. You just are trying to get them to bend the poles, right? So that's where you can use your body to just rotate your hips a little bit when weaving, okay? Any questions? Okay. When you're doing reeds, you have to remember you cannot hit the post. You hit the post, you get no points. You have to hit the reed that sits on top of the post, which gets significantly harder as they get smaller. So when you're using specifically a blade sword as opposed to a rattan round sword, you want to make sure that you set your sword up at the right angle. You don't want to hit it broadside, okay? So as you're riding, make sure that you've got your sword, you can even tilt your hand grip, right? So that as your sword goes by, it is horizontal, because that's what you want to try to accomplish, is setting your sword in the right angle. Yes.
And it's still upward this way, right? Not
It's
okay.
You're still doing the same motion, but as you come across, you want your sword to be horizontal.
Okay.
Okay. This is also very helpful for heads, especially my heads or somebody else's heads that you have to really hit. All right. There are the tinking heads where you can just go eek, eek. Or you've got heads like mine where you have to upcut. Okay. And you have to use some force in order to get the motion off of that head.
Pretend that's an annoying coworker.
Yes, pretend it's an annoying coworker.
There's a few.
Now, when you do heads that you have to uppercut, you do want a slight lift, okay? So, and you have to keep in mind where you're bringing your sword across, that you get a correct lift. Because then, when you make contact, you can just flip your wrist, which will help lift the head up, right? Around and then flick,
A swish and flick.
okay? Yeah. Leviosa. Any questions about
No, that.
swords? All right. So, when you walk your course, you think about those things. Okay, I'm gonna come in with my sword for reeds. I want to make sure I've got the grip that I want that's going to allow my sword to be horizontal. Okay? And then you're like, okay, I'm gonna have to get my sword back for the heads that are on the other side of the course, because most of us are not gonna ride this entire course with a sword. Okay? So then you're like, you have to switch your grip so that you can get the right angle. Right? I can't keep the same grip and without overextending my elbow, change the angle of the blade, right? So you do have to find the right grip on your sword, okay? And this is something you can just sit there and very easily practice moving between grips, okay? Any questions? So if you look at my sword, and most everybody else has, do you have a round handle? Somewhat, all right? So when you look at your sword handle, right, you have to figure out what's my point of contact. Now for me, this is always on my palm, okay? And then I know if I want a horizontal angle, I will put my grip on this edge of the handle. And that way I know I will get a horizontal angle, okay? When I want a regular tilted angle, I will then put my grip in the center of the grip, okay? That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is that helpful information? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
This has all been helpful information.
Okay, so figure out what your grip is that makes it feel comfortable for you to get those angles, and just play, flipping back and forth between grips, okay? Now these reeds are kind of high. It's great for those taller horses, but it's hard for us short people to walk and practice, okay? So what we're going to do, right, so we're going to be doing reeds, so we're going to find our right grip that gives us the right angle. We're going to come along, and we're going to go right, and then we're going to ease, right? I always like to come up high, the high guard, right? It keeps everything nice and open. All right, so someone's coming behind and setting them back up. All right, so you can stop recording for now. We're just going to practice a little.